Good morning, California exporters. Welcome to the IBT Online webinar for the California Online Global Program. We'll be starting in 2 minutes time at the top of the hour, just waiting for the last people to log on. So stay online and we'll be starting in 2 minutes. Good morning, California exporters. Welcome to the IBT Online California Online Global Program webinar today. We're really delighted that you could all be with us and that we can present the California Online Global Program. It's a great program. The California is just starting to roll out to help its exporters grow brand, business, sales internationally. A couple of words first on housekeeping. Before we actually get into the subject matter, and that'll help us also give the last couple of minutes for any more attendees to get on board. So just on housekeeping, first of all, this webinar is going to be about 45 minutes long. It's part of a series of webinars. We have a lot of resources that exporters can log on to and get and download for free from our website, which you have up there on the screen. ibt.onl for exporters. So during this webinar, there will be 4 polls that will be launching, and we would really appreciate your feedback. Just click with your mouse onto the relevant answers for yourselves. We'll also have some handouts of most important markets and important markets for California exporters in particular. The entire webinar will be recorded, and we will be sending you the slide deck and the recording in 2 days' time. So you can sit back and enjoy. You don't need to take notes or anything. You'll get the slide deck and the recording. And finally, at the end of this webinar, there'll be a very brief survey. We'd really appreciate it if you could take the moment just to fill out the main questions for the survey. It really helps us for that. We've got a lot to talk about today, so now let's just get on to our webinar first. Let's just introduce today's team. Today's team is Samantha Sofici from IBT Online. She's the Online Business Development Manager for IBT, and she is based in the States and is there really to help you exporters navigate through different proposals, different propositions, different case studies, different choices you have about website localization, online media, and so on. So Samantha is there, and she'll be helping us through the California Online Global Program. On your left is me. My name is Susanna Hardy, and I'm the Chief Content Officer for IBT Online, and I'll be doing some of the presentation today as well. So both Samantha and I are absolutely delighted to be here today, and I would like to do a big shout out for Jeff Williamson for the California STEP program. But first, just a quick word on our company. So who is IBT Online? IBT Online is a private company. We're an American company, although we have offices as well in Europe, in the UK, France, Germany, and then we have outreaches in main markets, mainly China, Middle East, South America. And we've been around for quite a long time, since 2002. We are 100% focused on small, mid-cap companies that export. And so we are 100% focused on exporters, and notably exporters and we think who want to use online tools to grow their sales. So we focus on online tools, that's websites and social media, to help exporters grow their business. Now, I would really love it if Jeff Williamson can say a few words about the California STEP program and the California State Trade Expansion Program. Jeff?
Yes, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Susanna. It's a pleasure to speak with you this morning. The State Trade Expansion Program is funded in part through a grant from the U.S. Small Business Administration. And yes, we are affected by the shutdown right now. However, we're still responding to emails and registrations. But overall, I think we'll be back up and running once the shutdown is over 100%. But we didn't want to miss this opportunity to work with IBT on this online seminar. So essentially, the State Trade Expansion Program has a few very broad goals, and those goals are to help more companies export, small companies, eligible small companies, help those eligible small companies increase the value of their exports, and to number 3 is something that's new to our program, is to help small businesses explore significant new trade opportunities. And looking at the whole e-commerce landscape globally, we believe that this is a very significant new trade opportunity. The services we provide are sponsoring California pavilions at major international trade shows, and also provide and organize some trade missions for particularly food and agriculture for the trade missions. But the pavilions are hitting aerospace, transportation equipment, automotive, medical tech, health and beauty, and a few other sectors. And the second service we provide direct funding to companies on a competitive application process through our individual company export promotion. And this is a flexible program where companies can apply for funding to support their participation in an international trade show, and also to use the funds to localize their digital marketing efforts. And that's part of what we're addressing today. So I'll hand it back to you, Susanna, and chime in later when it comes to the platforms.
Okay, but I think what we have now actually is just if you could just mention quickly on the e-commerce platforms and marketplace opportunities that you have.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Thank you.
So one thing I forgot to mention is our website is californiaexport.org. And when you go on the website, you can view our eligibility requirements under the register button. But one of the things we've been working on for the past couple of years is we've been working on developing relationships with some of the e-commerce platforms, particularly for e-retail. Now, there's a number of different channels in e-commerce, and this just happens to be the online retail environment. And the reason why this is so interesting is because the online retail environment is growing at a very rapid pace. And there was just an article out today, I think in Bloomberg, that shows that China next year will become the world's largest retail market. It will surpass the U.S. And about 35 to 40% of their retail sales are online. China will be a $2 trillion online e-retail market in the next year and a half. So we have developed relationships with Alibaba, with JD.com. We ran a promotion last year where we helped small companies get their products listed in JD, Jingdong.com. Cola, which is the largest or second largest cross-border operation where you're selling goods directly to Chinese consumers. Lazada, which is owned by Alibaba now, but that covers Southeast Asia, and Easy Buy over in Singapore. Essentially, what the service we're providing is we can assist companies to plug in and get set up on their systems, provide information about what it costs, how to do it, and how to support it. So I'm open to receiving anybody's emails at jeff.williamson@rcc.edu, and that's just a short intro to the platforms.
Thank you, Jeff, very much. And we will get back to that as well when we start talking about localized websites and e-commerce choices. But just to make sure that you're all right there, I wanted to just now launch our very first poll, which really is just talking about the STEP grants in California. Has your company used STEP grants yet? Have you used them successfully over many years? Do you use them occasionally? Are you still thinking about it? So you can just grab your mice and just click on the ones that you think. At the moment, we've got about 50% occasionally, 50% successfully over a couple of years, and a couple of people still thinking about it. And we have a few just saying we'd like also some more information about that. Thank you very much indeed. And we'll get back to you about some of those as well. And that'll now bring us to really just starting the core of today's agenda that we want to talk to you about. The first real, the first sort of main thing we want to really talk about is the online world of opportunities, and particularly why do exporters need international websites? Why do they need exports? Why do they need international websites? And what is website localization exactly? What does that mean for a company? Then we want to use some case studies and show you some examples of how exporters are currently using websites and how they're currently using them both for e-commerce and for distributors and distributor searches and so on across different markets. And finally, we're going to talk about the California Online Global Program, and Samantha's going to give you some more details. We've got a lot to talk about, as you can see, but we've hopefully left also some time for your questions. And again, I would really encourage you to just drop your questions into the chat box that you have on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll get back to them at the end of this webinar. So do please put your questions in. And it's great. I've seen the first question come in. We will get back to you at the end of the webinar and reserve some time for all those. So let's now talk about the online world of opportunities. But before we talk about sort of and why exporters need international websites. So why do we need international websites? And for us, we've had a look at sort of California and where does California export to? And it's actually, I think actually fascinating. This is a great example. I wasn't actually so surprised. Mexico and Canada are your number 1 and 2 export destinations. That makes sense to me. They're near neighbors, both of them, and large economies. But actually, what really strikes me is how very little that represents. Your single largest export market is 15%. It drops to under 10% for Canada and China. By the time you get to like number 7, you're at 3%. So what really amazes me is the breadth of your export destinations. And in fact, California exports to over 190 different countries. I had to Google how many countries are there in the world. There's apparently 196. So you're pretty well there. In other words, California is truly global. That's a very encouraging sign. I think that's worth keeping in mind. Now let's look at the internet and where we're looking at the online world. And this is something that you'll see all the time from U.S. commercial services and such. That 70% of the world's purchasing power is outside the U.S. and 85% of the world's economic growth is outside the U.S. They say this a lot, but absolutely the same thing applies to the internet and the digital world. Here are some of the numbers. So last year, we had over 4 billion people go online. And that means not just go online once, but have an individual address, and usually a smartphone, for example, that they were using to go online in a regular way. And for Hootsuite and We Are Social, who collates these stats, that means they're using the internet certainly weekly, if not daily. So 4 billion out of 7.5 billion using this on a daily, weekly basis. So we can truly say that the vast majority of internet users are outside the USA. And what are they doing when they're online? Well, most of them are communicating. Out of those 4 billion, 3.2 billion are using social media. So communicating all the time, not just communicating about sharing family pics, but also saying, hey, got a good recommendation for something, or have you seen that article in Bloomberg, or what is a good company that you can recommend to do X, Y, and Z. So there's a lot of talk there that you can get involved in, and that's what we mean also by digital marketing and social media use. As you know, not just for your domestic markets, but very importantly for your export markets. It's interesting as well, finally, just to note that this is still a very fast growing, given the size of this. We said, 3.2 billion people growing at 13% per annum. That's 1 million people a day going on social media, new users. And the internet alone is growing still at 7%. It's still growing at a very, very meaningful rate. What does this mean for your company? What does this mean for you as a California-based company looking to grow your business internationally? Well, I think that's the subject of a whole other debate. But the way I like to sort of summarize it is to really say that the internet has pulled the customer at the core. So it has made business, what has forced business to be customer-centric. Your customer now sits in a very privileged position in which he can actually, and he wants to find out more about you. Your customer is either B2B, your customer can be another business, it can be a consumer, it can be the government, it can be a distributor. But they have a lot more visibility over you through the internet, not just from your website, but also about seeing, what other people are talking about you. They can ask for recommendations. So the internet is customer-centric. It is client-focused. And this is something we will come back to several times as we go through this presentation, that whole notion of being client-focused, customer-centric, which is so important. Moving on now, let's go straight into, sorry about that. Let's move straight on into the sort of question again. Why do exporters need international websites? Well, I guess I could summarize it in one slide. Exporters need international websites because the world is online. So if your clients are online, your prospects, even including your future employees, your suppliers, they are all online already. So to find them, to be found, to be understood, and to do business, you need a localized website. That's the core of our business. That's the core of our mission and our vision, is that you can now be found, be understood, and do business using localized websites. This is actually going to lead me on to my poll number 2. And again, if you could get your little mice ready, I'll launch another poll here. Do you have already localized websites for your business, for your exports? So do you have localized websites? I can see that some of you are thinking about it. Some of you are using it also for some of your main markets or a few markets. But I think the majority of you are still thinking about it. But I'm glad to see that some of you are already using it for some of your export markets as at the moment. Great, good to see. And we will hopefully, inspire or encourage more of you to use the California Online Global Program to enlarge that and to get more websites localized. So what is a localized website? I think that's now going to be the next question. And the best way I have to explain a localized website is, in fact, to go back to some basics and to ask, how do search engines work? Search engines are basically localized. So when you think of Google, you think of google.com in the USA and in particular in California. That is not the same as the Google that I'm looking at, because I'm sitting in the UK at the moment. And my Google is google.co.uk. And it's not the same as google.com. And it's not the same as Google in Mexico or Argentina or Saudi Arabia or Germany. So think of Google as 192 different Googles. Google is present in 192 different countries. So think of them all as separate. The main core distinction about Google and all search engines, whether it's Baidu in China, Yahoo, Yandex in Russia, or even Bing, they are all localized. They all are client-focused, customer-centric. So that what I see is Google's algorithms decide that I would like something that is relevant to where I am. To not just where I am, but how I search. So whether I search on a phone or an iPad or a mobile or a PC, and where I'm sitting and what I've looked at in the past. So there's a lot of things that go into saying what Google will show me. But just because you have a great website in California doesn't necessarily mean that you will be visible to anyone outside your immediate environment. And certainly it means you're probably not visible to people outside your country, and certainly not in other languages. So really, in other words, you're going to have to sort of stretch that out a bit. So here's an example of what it would look like in the UK versus the US. Now, Samantha and I were just looking at this and we were saying, okay, what interests both of us? We both love shoes. So we said, what is red shoes? So Samantha was looking at red shoes in California. I was looking at red shoes in the UK. As you can see, I'm looking in the UK, google.co.uk. My red shoes are very different from Samantha's red shoes looking at google.com. She's looking at Macy's and Zappos and Nordstrom's. I don't know who those are. I'm looking at Debenhams and Zalando and M&S. Very different retailers, very different response from Google. This might be a trite example, but it is just to try and show you the difference between markets. Same Google, same search, different responses. So what is a website that is localized? What are the criteria of a localized website? Well, I tried to list them here in one slide. The main point is that they are that a website is market specific and client focused. That makes it localized. There are 10 criteria that I've listed in order to be localized. You can see that language is just one of them. So fully adapted to the local language is 1 out of 10 criteria. So just translating your website or sticking a translated page onto your existing website will not actually allow you to project into a new country. Let's say you want to go to Brazil. Okay, you've got a great US website. Put a Portuguese web page on your existing US website. You will not get into the Brazilian internet space because of all those other things that you need. You need a registered domain name for Brazil in order for Google to say, yes, this is relevant for Brazil. This website means something to Brazilian people. You have to have the right content management system. You've got to have optimization for the local search engine, which in Brazil's case happens to be Google as well. You have to be hosted locally. This is sometimes difficult. You have to actually have hosting nearby so that you can have fast up and downloads. And you've got to have regulatory requirements. This is, by the way, a big tidal wave that's coming your way. If you're on the web, watch that space. Regulatory requirements is something that's going to get bigger and bigger as we go through 2019, 2020. And already for Europe, if you're interested in European sales to consumers or to businesses, make sure you're compliant with GDPR. The fines could be very large. That's general data protection requirements. So those are the 10 criteria that we establish for localizing a website, making sure that your website is visible, optimal, and engaging for a local population so that your prospects, your local export prospects, think, that's a great website. I trust that company. I can understand that company. I want to do business with that company. It's interesting as well because this is something you'll see throughout. Again, this is something you see throughout the web. What about social media? It's the same. Social media is also market-specific, customer-focused, customer-centric. Here's an example also of what it means to have optimization for a market. This is something called keyword research. And here you're looking at keywords from different markets. Again, I take that example of saying, okay, you're a Californian company, you want to get into Brazil. Are you translating? Are you using the right words? This is the example of a company who came to us and said, how come we don't get any traction in Brazil? And they looked at their markets and said, it's because you're using the wrong words. And indeed, if you had translated it in just Portuguese, you would be getting, trem and comboio. And if you're in Portugal, 98% of the people who go on Google and look for the word train in Portuguese look for the word comboio. 95% of people in Brazil look for the word trem. Very different searches, very different results. Perhaps something that speaks to you even more because it's also in Spanish, an even bigger word, car. Car in Mexico or Spain, different words. In Spain, it's coche for a car. And again, social media reflects the search engines. It is client focused. And that's worth keeping in mind, again, when you go forward and looking at your social media campaigns and anything you're having to do for your international businesses. Here's a map quickly also of some of the big social media networks across the world. You'll note that Facebook is #1 everywhere. So what about these giants? What about the sort of Facebooks and YouTubes of the world? Are they localized? Well, YouTube, for example, is available in 76 different languages. It is extremely localized. The YouTube you look at in France is very different from the YouTube you would look at in California. But it is an amazingly versatile and efficient and very cost-effective tool for an exporter. And we can go through that in more detail if you have an interest. But it's one of the main ways to really reach out and touch into new markets in a very effective, very cost-efficient way. But as I said, it is a localized social media platform. And what about the big giant, Facebook? Facebook also, don't think of it as just the Facebook. Facebook's available in over 100 languages. Facebook is totally localized. The Facebook I get here, okay, it shows the same profile, shows my profile doesn't change, but perhaps the things that it will advertise to me will be different. Perhaps the languages will be different as well. And when you start adding in the WhatsApps and Instagrams and Facebook Messengers and all that, you start getting a very, very powerful network that you can really leverage in all these different markets. And this, I guess, brings us quickly to our third poll. Our third poll, guess what? Do you actively use social media? Do you actively use social media and online marketing for your business? So do you use it domestically? Do you use it in a few export markets? Do you use it internationally? Are you thinking about it? There's one or two of you who don't seem to be using it very much, but the vast majority are using it domestically. And there's a couple of you who are using it in a few export markets and and one or two of you also in all of your export markets. Good to see. Very happy to see that so many of you are using it. And I hope that it is bringing you success. I hope also that we will inspire you to use it in more of your export markets to leverage your websites and really push through and grow your sales. So now We want to talk now about how exporters use localized websites. What are some of the practical uses of all these websites that you can build? Now that if you've got a localized website, what do you do with it? We thought we'd just learn from the best and sort of look at some of the big examples. Apple. Apple has over 130 international websites. And some of them are, that's just for Apple, by the way. That's not for like, there's different websites, even more websites if you look at it for iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch. But just Apple is over 130 international websites. And that's also because companies like Apple or Airbnb or Uber, those are all companies that said right from the very start, we are going to use the web to really grow internationally as fast as we can, to push our international sales and boost it. We are going to use the internet to just span the globe from the start. And they did it in a very clever way. They did it in a very localized way of saying from the very start, we're going to be having localized websites everywhere. Our vision is that the web has now evolved and prices have now evolved, that small and mid-cap companies can also use online tools to leverage the web and to grow their exports. So that's basically the core of our business. So what we're looking at now, basically what we see is that if you have a localized website to be found, to be understood, to do business in local markets and export markets, in some ways your export website, you could argue, is even more important than your domestic website, certainly in terms of new lead generation. In your domestic market, very often you're already known. You have an established brand. But what establishes your brand in a new market? In today's world, your brand is established through new websites, through great websites. So if you're looking at an export market to grow your brand awareness, there's no more effective tool than a localized website. Basically, there are two types of localized websites that we see exporters typically taking. I'm simplifying a bit, but in order to get through the time, I'm simplifying a bit, but basically there's two types. There's one which is a standalone localized website. It's almost like, I guess it's an online brochure, but it's used by you, by your in-market partner, for example, a distributor or an agent, as a springboard for prospects, for generating leads, for being able to let prospects understand your business better, and really help your distributor show great commitment from you as an exporter into that local market. Another type of localized website for exporters is an e-commerce enabled. And this gets back to what Jeff was talking about as well with different platforms. And we'll talk about that later. But for us, even when you're on platforms, whether it's Alibaba or Amazon or whatever, a localized website helps you grow your brand rather than just the platform growing its brand. Let's go through some examples now of standalone localized websites. The first one I wanted to show you is a company. It's a US company. They've been around for a very long time. They're not especially tech or difficult to understand. It's not a big growth business. They make types of paper cutters. They make paper cutters for the art market, for schools, but also for food companies. So they make all different kinds of for florists in this case. They've been around for over 100 years. It's a difficult business to really have a strong brand awareness in. So that was one of their key things. But one of their key challenges in export markets is to find good distributors. They have lots of different verticals. They have verticals in 3, 4, 5 different markets in each segments, rather, in each market. So identifying distributors is key to them, and providing really good resources to those distributors is also key. The third challenge, which was less evident in the beginning, but which became very important once the websites had been established, was that the websites allowed the company to have visibility, a window on the end client. So how we've done it here is to grow And this is the similar online global program in a different state from the California online global program. But Bullman Products have added two countries every year for the last couple of years. They now have a whole bouquet of different country websites, which their distributors can use to log sales. So their distributors can go around and say, this is the product, these are some examples, and so on. But Bullman is in charge of its marketing. Bullman is in charge of its brand, and Bullman say, who are the end clients? Show us the end clients, because the distributors now have to log in the sales into the website. So that's a fantastic standalone website which fulfills the criteria that the end client wanted. Another example of a standalone website is ASG. ASG are a tech company, and again have just used an online global program similar to the California online global program. They've used it over 2 years now to build, again, a sort of series of websites for different key markets. And what they found was that their agents, because it is a very technical product that they produce, their agents might have great contacts, but they're not always engineers. And they're not always there to sort of really explain what the product is. So the websites were able to explain at a higher level than the agents, and we're able to reach out and really push into the prospects. So that, for example, one of the first ones we did was a China website for them. They were able to go to their China prospects. Their China prospects said, one, this company cares about China. You're committed to China to the extent that you actually produced a China website. And I finally really understood your product. Terrific. So the payback for that was certainly very fast. Equally, the Latin American websites, the Chinese, the Mexican websites, the Brazil websites had a similar sort of fast return on investment. All of these case studies, by the way, have testimonials and little videos on our website. I would really encourage you, go and listen to Hugo talking about it, and you'll find, or go through the testimonials and see which company best resembles you. You say, oh, that's a company that's similar to us, similar route to market. What did they do? And you can look through and find a testimonial that suits you in that sense, and see where that speaks to you. The other thing that ASG did was to eventually say to us, look, our US website's not too good. It's not enabled. It's not reactive. And now we have international websites which look which are more techy, which are better than our core domestic website. And so, in fact, we reversed and did their US website as well. But that's sort of a different story, as it were. Now let's talk very quickly about e-commerce enabled websites. And again, we've got a lot of assets about e-commerce on our website. We've got whole webinars on it. If you're interested in e-commerce, let us know. We can direct you towards free downloadables. There are basically 3 types of e-commerce that you can do. One is to go to online marketplaces, Amazon, Alibaba, Flipkart, whichever ones, and those are the ones that Jeff was saying earlier. California has actually negotiated very much sort of a shoe-in for California exporters, and I would really take advantage of that. That is a major advantage that you have. Another type of e-commerce is basically build your own, a little bit DIY. You've got to be a little bit more techy. It's a little bit harder if you're new to exporting. And then the third is basically to go on to a distributor and say, okay, well, my distributor is going to have that. So what do we sort of mean by this? Well, in terms of the big marketplaces, there are some absolute sort of, there's so many of them. There's the huge ones, Amazon, Alibaba, and Rakuten in Japan. And then after that, there's a whole bunch of sort of regional, local ones, depending if you're very focused on a particular market or not. Before we go any further, I want to finish off with one last poll. So one last poll that we're going to do here, which is, do you already sell via e-commerce? Are you using e-commerce already? In which case, are you using platforms like Amazon, Alibaba, or do you sell on your own website? Or are you thinking about it, or do you sell via your distributors' websites? And at the moment, actually, quite a few of you are thinking about it. Some of you are doing it already on your own. Some of you are already on your distributors. But there's quite a few also asking for questions about platforms like Amazon, which is very interesting. So thank you very much. And that concludes our polls. Now, in terms of distributors, the marketplaces that you can see here, some of them have some major disadvantages, like costs, but some of those can be relegated with what Jeff was talking about. And if you have questions on that, please get back to us or Jeff directly, and we can. And Jeff certainly has a lot of answers about the platforms. Some of you also said you were looking at selling via distributor platforms. Again, there tends to be either generalist sites, I mean, Lowe's or something like that is a generalist site, or specialist sites like, in this case, I've said wholesale ordering services from Tree of Life, for example, or Rexel Electrical Services. These are specialist sites. The problem with those, again, is whose brand is really benefiting from this? And do you want to see your product up there next to some of the big guys or some of the smaller guys in terms of pricing and all the rest? So again, distributor platforms can be sort of tricky as well. In both cases, whether it's a marketplace or a distributor, a marketplace platform like an Amazon or a distributor platform, in both cases, a way of getting around that and of making sure that it's your brand that develops is to have a localized website. So you can have a localized website on something like this, on one of these distributor platforms, that probably clicks through to order from, for example. And that's worth thinking about in terms of your exporter strategies. Just to give you some examples, this is a company who, I guess one of the challenges they have is that they want people to say AMSOIL rather than motor oil. They want people to say this is an AMSOIL product. I want to sell AMSOIL. I don't want my customers to go into a store and say, where's the motor oil? I want them to go in the store and say, where's the AMSOIL? So they're very much brand awareness, and therefore it was absolutely important to them not to be on big platforms, but instead, in fact, to grow their own brand and their recognition, and therefore have a system whereby they have their own localized website, even if you can buy via distributors. That was something I think that they thought long and hard about, and it's working out very well for them now. Another one is VaporPit, and this is just a sort of example of having your own website in a particular market. Now, if anyone's ever done e-commerce in Brazil, it's tricky. Brazil is not for the faint-hearted in terms of e-commerce. There's a lot of regulation involved in it, but they decided, that was one of their key markets that they had to get into. We spent a long time, arranging this website for them and making sure that it was doing good business for them. But it was clearly important to generate a lot of demand, and therefore and brand awareness and product awareness, and therefore had to be accompanied with quite a lot of marketing, but absolutely had to be their own standalone website. Again, even if they were then branching out into via other platforms. Again, we have a lot of other data and on e-commerce and on distributor websites that we can go on, but I would really ask that you also just go to our website, and you can, like as I said, you can listen to clients talking about their strategy, about what they did, how they decided to build a global brand. And these are all SMEs. These are all small, mid-sized companies who decided to use localized websites and online marketing to generate more leads and establish credibility in these markets. Right. This leads us then to sort of my final conclusion on this, which is, whichever route to market you are choosing and looking at, whether it's e-commerce, distributor, in-market partner, or on your own, all benefit from having a localized website. It is really the only way to ensure that you own and nurture your online real estate. Your brand and the online world are inextricably linked today. The internet is truly ubiquitous, truly global. And in order to win that brand, you need to have and own and manage your online presence on an international basis, and therefore have localized websites. So let's now turn to your success. You know, how you would do it, and the California Online Global program. And I would love it if Samantha could also jump in here and talk a little bit about that program, the Online Global program. Samantha?
Absolutely. Thank you, Susanna. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. So I'm going to briefly talk about the California Online Global program. We currently work with a little less than 20 states, the beautiful California being one of them. So the option A is designed as kind of like a template option where we will deliver 2 fully localized websites for your top 2 target markets. And we go through our 10-step website localization process for both websites. So for example, if you want to go into Mexico and Germany, by the end of this, you will have one website in Mexican Spanish for Mexico and another website in German for Germany. Each website has 12 web pages, which is a home page, an About Us page, 9 product or service pages, and a Contact Us page with 2,000 words of localized content. And the 2 websites can differ from one another. So say you have a product line or a service that performs better in one country, and then you have a different product line or service that performs better in the second country. The websites can be reflective of that. So they are very localized for you as a company and also for the country. The budget for Online Global Option A is $12,000, but participating companies will qualify for a reimbursable $3,000 grant from the CITD, so making your total cost $9,000 for both websites. So it's a pretty good deal. Then moving on to option B, which is anything above and beyond option A. So if the scope of work for option A was just too small, maybe you want one website, but you want it to be 40 web pages and 10,000 words, that would qualify under option B. We still go through the same 10-step process that we do for option A. We do the same thing for option B. So this includes everything from search engine optimization to making sure that it's hosted locally. We help you purchase the local domain names. We make sure it's secure, it's responsive. So a lot of things go into both programs A and B. But option B is just a personalized scope for the company. And the budget depends on the scope. So depending on how many countries, the languages, how many pages, how many words, the functionality of it. If you want it to be an e-commerce platform, that's also makes it an option B. So the budget just depends on the scope of work. But regardless, if you qualify for the grant from the CITD, they will reimburse $3,000 of the bottom line. And what's important to note about both options before we move on is that both options A and B take about 3 months to deliver. So from the kickoff conference call, all the way until project delivery can be 3 months or less, and you will be online in your top markets. Now going into international online marketing, which is the second service that we provide. And that is composed of 4 things: search engine optimization, social media marketing, content management, editing and support, and reporting and analytics. And this is a monthly ongoing program that we have with companies. And we have a social media marketing program for you, which, depending on what countries you would like to have this social media marketing, we will deploy a online marketing strategy that we will work together with you to kind of come up with it. So depending on the country that you're going into, we will research and see where your target customers are, and we'll make sure to be on those platforms. We will be posting for you. What we want to do is create that base of followers so that you have that credibility and the trust in the market, and so that they eventually turn into your customers. And we have just a program that helps companies go through that. But the total cost of the online global social media program just depends on the scope of work once again. So depending on the amount of countries that you would like to go into, or how often you would like for us to post, that's how the budget will be determined. Moving on.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Samantha.
You're very welcome.
We've got quite a lot of questions as well, so I want to leave a little bit of time for that. I think I just wanted to mention for option A and option B of the California Online Global Program, all of the examples that I showed you today of companies who have localized websites and who are using them very successfully all went through on option A or on option B. The two first ones both had a similar option A. The two second ones, which were e-commerce enabled, had an option B. So you can see that even with an option A, which is just $12,000 minus the $3,000, so $9,000 total cost to the company for two totally localized websites, they were able to really boost their business and have really fantastic returns on that and achieve the objectives that they want. The other thing I wanted to just point out before we open up to some questions, because I always think you should, come invited with something, bring something to the party. We've decided that you can have some handouts. So if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, there's like sort of little toolkit on the right-hand side that's called handouts, 3 out of 5. And we figured since your two top export markets are Mexico and Canada, we would give you some infographics on Mexico and Canada online environment. So you can pull those off you should be able to just drag those off onto your screen to have a look at later. And the third handout is about global social media for exporters, so the major global social media players and how they act, where they are in different export markets. Again, you can just, you should be able to just drag that off. If you have any problems accessing those infographics, let me know, and I will. I can always just wing them over to you or something like that. But there you have it, sort of little party bag to go off with before we answer questions. You can have some infographics there. I have noted that there's a whole string of questions, in fact, sort of a lively bunch out there in California. First of all, just because this is showing up a couple of times, yes, you will get the slide deck and the recording after this webinar. It'll be sent to your email that you registered with. So you will get the slide deck as well. I'm just putting that out because that's been asked a couple of times. Other questions. Jeff, there's a question for you. Is this a program that we can use in conjunction with other programs? Jeff? Jeff might be having some problems with his audio. He had some problems earlier. I don't know if he's still got some problems there. Well, let me answer for Jeff. The California Online Global Program is part of the STEP program, and if you're eligible for it, which means that you're a California registered company, you should be able to access these California grants, the STEP grants for that.
Okay, yes. Hi, Susanna.
Hi,
yeah,
good.
Sorry. I was on mute for a while. So yes, this is an eligible expense under the individual company export promotion. So a company, if they're interested to, localize their websites or set up the websites or use IBT or or any other vendor for that matter, to do a website localization, they would need to apply for funding through the individual company export promotion and meet the eligibility requirements. So the eligibility requirements, I'll just briefly review those, is they must qualify or be fit the definition of a small business according to U.S. Small Business Administration. For manufacturers, that's 500 or fewer employees. For service-based companies, the thresholds are a little bit different. They need to be based in the United States. We say California, but minimally based in the United States. Must meet 51% or more U.S. content rule, and be in business for at least 1 year. So those are the primary eligibility requirements, and they would just simply have to submit their request, outline what it is they want to do under the individual company exports promotion program, which can be found at californiaexport.org/register.
Thanks, Jeff. Samantha, a quick question for you. Which markets are best for going online? So which market should I start with, I guess is the question. Which markets are best to go online?
Yeah, that is a great question that we get pretty frequently. So it totally depends on the company and the strategy that they want to use. Some companies already have some exports going into certain countries, and they might want to either support a distributor there, or they just want to grab a better foothold there, and that's where they choose to go. Other companies just choose the countries that have that are already really well established. So Europe, Asia, maybe some of Latin America, and that they're kind of comfortable with. And then other companies take a completely different approach, where they go into countries that they don't have a great presence in, but they want a better presence in, or they don't have a presence in at all, and they would like to have an online presence to kind of feel out the market. So depending on the company and your goals and your objectives, that's the country that you should choose.
Thanks, Samantha. A question which I think I'll probably take is one of the questions which might be of interest to many people. There's one of you are asking, I've heard that I cannot buy my domain name in some markets. How do I then get a localized website? That's a very good question. There are some markets where some countries, in order to buy your domain name, for example, your .co.uk, whatever, that's your domain name, company dot, and then the market fixation, so MX for Mexico, for example. You have to have an address in that country. Australia, for example, you cannot buy an Australian or New Zealand, an NZ. You cannot buy an NZ unless you have an address there. We, as an agent, we can do that. And what we do for clients in that case is we will buy it and then sell it directly to you at cost. So, so it's sold directly to you. You then own that domain name. So that gets around any of that problem. So a very simple solution to what looks like a bit of a puzzle. Samantha, there's another question for you, which is, I use Google Translate. How does that compare to localized websites? Samantha, are you okay on that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. Google Translate is great for some things, but it's not the best in terms of website localization. For a few reasons. One of them being Google Translate isn't specific to, it just says Spanish in general or English in general. So the translation could be a bit spotty, which you don't want a user to go onto your website and think it says something that you don't want it to say. And then also, Google doesn't recognize, the search engines don't recognize Google Translate as it being a local language. So if you just have an English site with Google Translate, Google just sees it as an English site. So if you're trying to go into, say, South America, you will have zero preference in terms of search engine optimization. So great for some things, not great for business and business development in specific countries.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Samantha. Right. I guess there's just one other question that I think we have time for. Maybe I'll just get this one, which is someone is asking, their distributor runs their website in their export market. Can they buy it back? Is the question. I guess that's something we see regularly, which is and which causes problems over time. You really don't want your distributor owning your online brand. You should own your domain names. If nothing else from this webinar, you can take away the fact that you should look at your most important markets that you're targeting this year, next year, whatever, and say which markets are the most important for us on, say, a 5-year view, and make sure you own those domain names. Even if you don't, even if you're not going to develop a localized website today in those markets, you should at least not give away that online digital real estate to a distributor. Distributors might be great today. They might not always work out in the long term. Also, who's benefiting from developing that? Is it you or the distributor? So from our perspective, your domain name is a valuable asset that you should cultivate and own. It is the way and springboard for you to grow your brand. You should own it, control it. So that's a pretty firm view from our point of view. We've done our hour. Thank you so much. There's a lot more questions. We will get back to you on an individual basis. I would ask that you just spend 2 seconds when we turn off just to fill out that little questionnaire. It'd be really helpful for us. We wanted to also say a big thank you to Jeff Williamson for organizing, for letting us use the platform here to talk to California exporters and launch this California Online Global Program. We're really excited for California exporters to benefit from this very innovative, very rewarding program that California is putting in place. So happy exporting. Have a great day. Thank you all so much for being here. And as I said, happy exporting to you all. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.